It's just a culture of like denouncing. In America, all you see is like people just denouncing and pointing fingers at each other without recognizing each other's humanity. That is such a North Korea thing. We always have to keep denouncing our enemies. That's how you destroy your own country.
Today, sit down with North Korean defector Yeonmi Park, author of In Order to Live, A North Korean Girl's Journey to Freedom. Her memoir recently made it to the top 20 of the Amazon bestsellers list, nearly 6 years after she published it.
The saddest thing for my people is that they don't even know they are slaves. And how do you fight to be free when you don't know you're a slave?
This is American Thought Leaders, and I'm Yanya Kellick. Yeonmi Park, such a pleasure to have you on American Thought Leaders.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor.
So Yeonmi, first of all, congratulations on making the top 20 Amazon bestseller list. I mean, top 20 of all, I guess it's in the US, right? That's an incredible achievement with your book, which is, of course, In Order to Live, A North Korean Girl's Journey to Freedom.
Yeah, it's been published 6 years ago. And it's interesting. When it came out, it was not a huge bestseller at all, especially in the US. But now suddenly people really became interested. So I'm truly grateful.
So why do you think people are so interested all of a sudden? I mean, I'm incredibly interested, and this is a really broad and incredible story. But why do you think now is when this interest is starting to grow?
So when this book came out, I mean, New York Times did not give a good review at all. They almost, in a way, like, almost like, in a way, kind of go, why does anybody have to read her book? That kind of review. And the book did really well in like Sweden, the UK, Hong Kong, Singapore, Taiwan, other regions, not in the US. And I think it's been doing really well because I've been starting reaching out to people who actually care about oppression, who actually care about injustice. So somehow before I wasn't the mainstream, wasn't just interested to talk about this story. And of course, if the media doesn't talk about it, it's hard to reach people.
The book is honestly one of the best books I've ever read, and because I think the book can help people understand a little bit, and it's very hard to do this if you've lived in a free country your whole life, what it's like to live in a regime, in a dictator, under a dictatorship. When I was a kid, my parents escaped from communist Poland in the 70s, and we had a rule in the family, and the rule was never talk about anything in the family, outside of the family. You can never talk about it, right? And I thought my parents were crazy. What's wrong with this is what kids did all the time, right? We would just say to each other, hey, my mom did this, but no, that would be treason. But actually, when I read your story, I thought, oh, wow, okay, I see a little bit of that. And of course, in Poland, it was never nearly as bad as North Korea. But why don't we start at that point, right? Like, why were my parents not crazy?
Yeah, I mean, in North Korea, literally why you say just not gonna kill yourself. It's gonna kill up to 3 to 8 generations of your family. So I remember the first thing my mom taught me as a young girl was not even like, be careful with the strangers, be careful, like these things. But she said, like, watch out what you say. Like even the birds and mice couldn't hear my whisper. And she said, the most dangerous thing that you have in your body is your tongue. And that was the only way that she knew how to protect me. So in a way, in North Korea, even thinking is not free. Like thought crime is a real thing. So that's how they oppress you to the point where even you don't even know how to think freely.
I mean, so what could happen? And actually you have an amazing kind of vignette, even with your mother pretty early in the book. Why don't you tell me about that, about what could happen when someone says something a little bit off?
Yeah, like one of the examples that my mom heard from the uncle that she knew, some friend that she knew, that the dear leader Kim Il-sung, he didn't die from the exhaustion. He died from heart attack. And the regime was telling us that Kim's died from working so hard for the people, the well-being of the people. And I literally believed that growing up in North Korea that dear leader was starving and he would not sleep well. He was working so hard for us, and how lucky that we are. We have such a great leader. And then she was telling her friend, and like, can you believe what the enemy is saying? our dear leader died from exhaustion, but they say he died from heart attack. But she was saying it, like defending the ideology, right? But her best friend was a spy. And that's another thing about North Korean regime is that if there are 3 people, like I watch you, you watch somebody. So like I'm being watched, I'm watching somebody. So even though I'm being such a decent person, not gonna report on you, that I know somebody is watching me. But if that person not gonna report on me, that person also being watched. So you cannot like escape that. You have to report on each other. And that's how regime creates distrust between people. And that's how you create this North Korea where nobody can trust even their own back. Nobody can trust anything at that point. And of course, that taught my mom lesson that, you just never know. You don't actually have a friend in North Korea.
So, what can happen to someone if they, even say something so innocuously, so even supporting the regime as your mother did? What could happen?
So my mom's case was really lucky that she, because she was saying defending it, and she had young children, so she was begging them, and she never had committed that kind of offense before. But if she was saying it, just like would that be possible, something like that kind of a nuance, then she would be executed, and then the 3 generations of her family would go to concentration camp for her crime. It's called by guilt by association. So the fact that you're being associated with that person, that you are guilty automatically. And that's like a very similar thing in America now. There's like white guilt, like white privilege, right? What does it even mean? Why anybody born today have to be guilty about the slavery that happened hundreds of years ago? That is not true. But in North Korea, they exactly do the same thing where because your great-great-great-grandpa was a capitalist, now you're guilty that your blood is forever tainted.
It completely would change your relationships. And by the way, I do want to touch on this, the whole white guilt and so forth question, maybe a little later. But how completely does it change every aspect of the relationships that you can have with people living like this?
That's the thing, like in North Korea, there's no word for friends. We have a word for comrade, though. But it's a different thing. When you're a comrade or when you're friends, like comrade means you're working for the revolution. You share the same goal of the revolution, the glory of the party. When you're friends, you're there for each other. So now regime removed a lot of concept from us, like love. We don't know what love is. Like I never seen anybody saying love to each other. The only love that people are allowed to know is that love for the dear leader by written form. And also they get rid of the concept like human rights. So, right, the human rights, when the baby is born, they don't know what human rights is. Somebody teach them. They go to school to learn about human rights. Like that, we need to learn. But regime get rid of them. They get rid of them in the dictionary. So I would joke like we don't even know what gay is. We don't have the vocabulary for it. And that's how they control your thoughts. Like that George Orwell talks about doublespeak. Who controls the language, who controls the thoughts. So if you get rid of this liberty, human rights, freedom, friends, even depression, right? I don't know what depression is. I don't even know what stress is. Because how can you be stressed in a socialist paradise? So they don't put that word for you. So you don't even know what that is. That's what the ultimate mind control looks like.
Animal Farm, this book sort of gives you, in a very simple way, again, a picture of how a communist society emerges and how it works. So that's fascinating. You had a big realization when you read that book.
Yeah, until that point, I had some kind of chaos when it comes to believing anything, right? I arrived in South Korea almost like 15, 16 years old. And then they told me, well, Americans are not bastards, right? They're not colonizing South Koreans. They are good people. And whatever you believed in North Korea, everything was a lie. So believe us, what I'm telling you is true. And then at that point, I get, so how do I know what you're telling me is not a lie? There's no evidence. So everything that I believe was a lie. And it was hardest thing that how do you trust again? And that's when I read The Animal Farm by George Orwell. And that just explained to me what happened to my people, what happened to my country. And the saddest part about it is I initially thought Kim Jong-un and Kim Jong-il, they were the problems, right? They are the only sole responsible party for this like tragedy, the human suffering. But the thing is, you see all those animals in the beginning, they knew what the truth was. And then there's a fear. Then they keeping silence. And then when it comes to young animals, they are so dumb. They don't even know what the alternative life look like. They don't even know that's possible. And that was me when I was born in that country. I had no idea what the life was like before Kim's or before Communist Revolution. And for me, I did not know life could be this way. And I think this is the saddest thing for my people is that they don't even know they are slaves. And how do you fight to be free when you don't know you're a slave? That's an impossibility. And this is the most scary ending of the whole story. The fact that you know you're oppressed, you're not oppressed, right? The true oppression, true isolation is like North Koreans. They don't even know that they are isolated.
Well, it's really incredible. I mean, I want to talk a little bit more because right now we're talking about this ideological control and, of course, control of language. And then, of course, this sort of surveillance state. But the thing that I had never thought of until I read your book is that the hunger is actually a deliberate form of control.
Yeah.
How does that work?
So, well, I mean, when the Soviets collapsing and then they were stopped subsidizing North Korea's economy, right? And North Korean regime was like, okay, we are not gonna feed people. So there are 10% of the population living in capital. And in North Korea, there are hierarchy between people. We have 50 different classes. What an irony, they began with the most equal society in the world, which is a communist, and they created 51 actually classes in between people with the same Koreans. So in Pyongyang, as a North Korean, you have no freedom to even go to next town without the travel permit. North Koreans' dream is not like traveling to Europe in their life. They don't even know what Europe is. Their dream is going to their own capital in their life. So the regime thought, okay, as long as we keep this 10%, the core class that supports the revolution, then we are good. That's how they measure their success. We're gonna keeping the only 10% alive, and until the 90% all die, we don't need to do anything about it. And then Kim Jong-il said, oh, it's easy to do socialism when there are less people. So he wanted to die out. He wanted us to cleanse population through the starvation.
I'm remembering something called Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I think it was called. But it's like if you're at the level where you know, food is your basic need, which sounds like it was, you know, pretty much your whole life while you were in North Korea. That was your number one fixation, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing, like in North Korea, as an average person, right? You eat the lunch, but then you worry about dinner. If you worry about dinner, how am I going to find a dinner? When you find a dinner, you're going to be, okay, I made it one day, but how am I going to survive tomorrow? You don't know if you're going to find a food for tomorrow or not. So every single like minute of your existence, you're worrying about your survivor, worrying about finding food. So when you're worrying about your own survivor every single minute, you're not going to think about what is freedom, what's the meaning of life, right? You don't question anything. You're so desperate. So that's why it's so easy for the regime to control the population there when they're so weak and so desperate, and they have no time to thinking about other than just surviving and finding food. In a way, it is very effective tool to control the population, but it is a torture. It's being starved is worse than being raped. It's the worst form of torture you can experience. And that's how the regime using this starvation as a tool to controlling these millions and millions of North Koreans in this 21st century. Like the one missile test that Kim Jong-un does each time costs the money that he can feed entire 25 millions a year. He did 30 tests since 2017. So if he just did 4 tests less, nobody had to die, starve in North Korea. This regime just they don't want to feed people. And that's the thing, like they say like North Korea is poor. Like no, North Korea is not poor. The regime just chooses not to feed people.
Yeah, I mean, this reality is, you know, very, very difficult to fathom. And, you know, it sent a chill down my spine when you said that hunger, you know, is worse than rape. And this is, of course, unfortunately, in your book, you describe this as something you're familiar with because of the realities of, you know, what you tried to what you were kind of forced to do to survive. Right?
Yeah.
So your father was actually put in jail.
Yeah.
And that put you down into I guess, a lower place
Very
in the
low
caste.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then so that if you're low on the list.
So yeah, that's the thing. Like in North Korea, when you are born, before you are born, your life is determined for you, based on what your great-great-grandfather did. It determines what city do you live in, where do you go to even school, do you become a farmer, do you become a factory man, or going to university, right? So depending on the caste, it doesn't matter what you want to do. Nobody owns themselves in North Korea. Like I don't even have the right to decide what I want to wear in North Korea. I mean, it was a joke for here, right? People say, oh, North Korean men have to have the Kim Jong-un's haircut. And it was silly to them, right? That's how funny is that Kim Jong-un demands everyone look like his haircut. And that like that, people got zero autonomy. So you get executed for watching a foreign film and giving it to your friends. You get sent to prison by wearing jeans. The song that you listen to, the book that you read, even clothes, even maybe like haircut, you don't get to decide. The regime decides every single thing for you. That's the ultimate big state looks like.
So you were 13, I think, when you decided to try to go to China to escape.
Yeah.
Right?
To find food, yeah. So yeah, it was 2007, and that we just couldn't find more food anymore. That was like the last strike, and it wasn't like I was planning the grand escape. I never even seen the map of the world, right? We don't have the internet in North Korea. You don't like go up, look up like what the outside world look like. I was just barely at nighttime looking at China and seeing its lights coming from China. And then I thought maybe if I go where the lights were, I would find some food to eat. And that's why we escaped.
When I read this book, when I read your book, your family was incredibly important to you, as is, I think, in many places in the world, right? And in this regime, and I mean, both your mother and your father, you say your father, you believe that he sort of saw outside of the propaganda somehow. I think you said because he was a tradesman and that can help. Your mother was also, somehow originally very indoctrinated into the regime's ideology, but, started to see through it along the way, right? What's struck me is, we know from research done in the US that people that grow up in a complete family have a huge, huge advantage over people that don't, that grow up even in a single parent household and so forth, right? So what I'm fascinated with is why is the regime, they try to break everything down. They control your thoughts, they control your language, they control you through hunger. They're trying to reduce the population, but somehow they haven't tried to undermine the family unit, right?
So that's interesting. I know some of the countries, like they ask the state raised kids, right? Like even though when the Germany under Hitler, that the kids go to like this daycare and the teachers would raise them, and many hours they're being separated from their kids. I think initially North Korean regime tried that, and then when the Soviet Union collapsed, they couldn't even afford that, right? Teachers were starving and dying on the streets. Everybody was starving, so the society kind of became chaos, right? That's the thing seeing the dead bodies on the streets every single day. They cannot even track who died. And you just see people like floating around on the river. You go to train station and people go out to find food and they die on the street. The cannibalism, people eating each other. And it's a thing like in North Korea when somebody says, I'm gonna go and I will be back, you don't know if you're gonna ever see them again, right? That's a daily life. So it became such a chaos for the regime, and that's when I was born, like in 1993 at the end of it. And that was like middle of the famine, and when like so many people were dying. So I think that's when regime's ideology became a lot weaker. And in a way that that's how the market was rising in North Korea. Until then, like the market was something unheard of. Like
Well, completely illegal, right?
Yeah,
All the way
illegal.
through. You could
Yeah.
be executed.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
And it's like the money was something so shameful thing. Like people thought like, who talks about money, right? Like in North Korea, there's like the word profit is really demonized word. That's like a very capitalist thing. And till this day, you gotta be careful saying the word like profit there. And I mean, but this famine created this opportunity for the people to start engaging in the black market. And people would go sell your cardigan and buy some corn. And in a way, that was also maybe a good opportunity for us to learn independence from the state.
You know, your story, it intersects so many different areas. You know, you escaped to China where you were able to find food, but you only found like another form of terror and slavery.
Yeah.
And, you know, you stepped right into this prolific human and sex trafficking business in that whole part of China.
Yeah, I think this is something still happening right now when I'm talking to you. Right at this point, there are about 300,000 North Koreans are hiding in China. Most of them are women, and all of them being trafficked, literally. Like 99% of them are. And because of the China's one-child policy, they were aborting a lot of girls. And then, especially in the rural areas right now in China, up to 30 million young men cannot find wives because there's not enough women for them. And that number is keep increasing as the time goes by. And the regime, that's how, but the thing is, North Koreans are not recognized by the Chinese government as refugees. So they call us fugitives. So they try to catch us and then send us back to North Korea, which is catching Jews and send them back to concentration camp. It is a crime against humanity. When we escape, we are not refugees, we are defectors. When you escape the regime, that means you are defying the party's ideology, right? So that's when you send back to North Korea, you get severely punished or executed. So North Koreans are so vulnerable in China. And then these human traffickers know that the last thing we will do is going to police and ask for help in China because they are the ones who can catch us and send us back. And that's why human traffickers keep telling us like, I can kill you at this very moment. You are less valuable than even pig. And North Koreans going into, of course, like the sex slavery, prostitution, chat rooms, gang, and even some of them, even like their organs get harvested. And North Korea, this is hundreds, thousands of them right now still trapped in China. And this is happening this 21st century. This is modern day slavery is happening. And this is shocking that how nobody talks about this.
No, and I mean, what comes out in your book is that there's a whole very well established system of basically gangs and kind of cartels that organize this. And you know, you ended up with basically this gangster, right? And because it was a better option than certain death, I suppose. And you were able to actually find your mother in this. Can you just maybe tell me a little bit about that? I think it's just such a touching and shocking and heartbreaking, and everything's part of the story.
So at 13, I crossed this frozen river with my mom. And then, of course, the first thing I see is my mom being raped. And until that point, I never even seen what sex was. There's no sex education in North Korea. No movies that people are sleeping with each other kissing. And then after they were raping my mom and said, if you guys want to stay in China, you have to be sold as sex slaves. So they sold my mom for less than $100, around $65. And then they sold me over $20 because I was virgin, and somehow that's very valuable in China. And then when I was being sold to another human trafficker, I wanted to kill myself. Like I was separate from everybody that I knew. I was in China. I was even more oppressed than being in North Korea. And when I was trying to kill myself, this trafficker who bought me told me that if I become his mistress, he would save my family for me. So that was a deal that he was offered. So I thought, okay, if I sacrifice myself, I can rescue my family. So I did become his mistress at 13. And then he brought my father to me. And that's how I was able to reunite with them.
And he kept his word, and you had no way of knowing that he would, because he had 100% of the power in this.
But that's the thing, that's the complex being a human. Like, nobody's pure evil. Nobody's purely good either. Like, you know, it's so hard to define what is pure evil looks like. And of course, he was a heartless man, like raping 13 years old. Now I'm still small, but I was even skinnier, a tiny, tiny thing. And he still did that. But then he also still saved my parents for me. That's why I couldn't hate, you know. It's for so many times I was fantasizing killing him when I was being raped by him. But now I'm looking back, I am grateful. So it's that's the thing, like it's hard to be a human. It's such a human nature, so complex thing.
So you found a way, again, through I think an amazing set of circumstances to make it to South Korea. I mean, it's frankly a miracle that you made it through the Gobi Desert in the middle of the night at -40. Yeah. Which, by the way, -40 Celsius and Fahrenheit, the same for all the viewers. And it's really, really cold. Yeah. No map. And I mean, it was with missionaries that guided, that basically put you up to it. How did that work?
So while I was in China, we knew this other nursing defector woman. She met the missionaries, and they said, if we come to their shelter and study Bible and become Christian, and somehow if we prove our faith to them that we are Christians, they were going to help us to go to South Korea. And then so we joined the shelter, and they taught me about like God and Jesus Christ, all of that. And once somehow we proved our faith to them, that's when they told us, okay, if you know escape from China, you have to walk across the frozen Gobi Desert and using a compass in your hands, because it's like the chance of making in the desert is so low, they cannot even come with us, right? How do you even go back? And that's why they were just letting us go in the desert with a compass and told us to go the west and north between those directions. And eventually I followed the northern star, and I mean literally just in the middle of the desert, in the northern star, praying, and hopefully that leads to freedom. And it did. It really did. So it was where I have seen so many miracles in life.
So, you know, you described that you made it to South Korea through Mongolia. You know, they set up some false papers for you. They flew you over. It was your first flight. It's just, again, such an unbelievable telling tale. I hope everybody reads your book. What I found this moment where, you know, you're now in South Korea. You've gone through I guess it's like a basically government training camp to learn the vocabulary to be able to function in this society. You know, you were saying that the language is so controlled. There's all these elements. And, you know, you've been through what you've been through, you know, and I think you went to an internet cafe, but the person was kind of, you know, I don't know, I guess racist against North Koreans, right?
Yeah.
And it crushed you, and you wanted to hide. And so I thought this was just, again, you're talking about the complexity of the human psyche, right? You've been through so many things that most of the people watching this show couldn't even imagine, right? And so, but here with this, you know, punk in the internet cafe, you know, being the way he is, sort of biased against North Koreans, it crushes you and hurts you so much. I thought that was such a fascinating moment. I mean,
yeah, it's now actually it makes me think what it was, right? Like North Koreans are so strong, right? They be trafficked, they go through so unbelievable things and willing to be free and go to South Korea and be free. And they are the highest group in South Korea to commit suicide. So you would think like these people are tough as like rock or steel. And then why on earth they go to South Korea and kill themselves after all that suffering? And I think what it is, to me at least right now, is one, that we had a different expectation. When we are going to South Korea, we are promised of freedom and justice. And when we're going to China, we're just looking for food, right? Like the motivation to go to China is very primitive thing, survivor, getting food. But from China to South Korea is a lot dangerous journey. So North Korean regime wouldn't execute you if you're not trying to leave China and then just find food and go back to North Korea. They would like send you to prison camp. But if they do find out that you're trying to escape to South Korea, that's where you get executed or sent to lifetime concentration camp. So even the sentences are different. And that's why when you go to South Korea, it is literally the ultimate step. And what do you risk your life for? That's when you risk your life for freedom. And I think that's why when we go to South Korea, we got somehow different expectation. That we think South Korea is gonna be like our people, right? Like they're not Chinese, like speaking same Korean. So going there, being discriminated by your own people, and then being discriminated being what, right? So I think expectation is really different. And also the loneliness that you feel. In China, like you are so busy surviving, you don't even think about what loneliness is, right? Every single second is struggle to survive in China. But when you go to South Korea, finally your basic needs are met. You have at least food and ramen. Then you started thinking about the people that you lost in the journey, the people you left behind. And I think that's why life is a lot harder in South Korea. I mean, not harder, but it still feels such a struggle adjusting to South Korea in the beginning.
When did you realize there was such a thing as freedom?
I heard the freedom when I was in China. This de facto lady told me, let's go to South Korea. There, we're gonna be free. And then I was like, what is free, right? And then she's like, oh yeah, we can wear jeans there. And then you can watch South Korean K-dramas. Because I love the K-dramas. And then it's like, nobody will gonna arrest you for that. So back then, my thought of freedom was not like freedom of speech or none of this. I thought, okay, if I go to South Korea, then I can wear jeans and I can watch TV for free. So I was like, okay, why don't we just risk our life for that, right? I mean, even that was sounded to me, it was like unbelievable freedom. Like how anybody have freedom to wear jeans. And that's what I thought of freedom back then at 15.
So somewhere along the way, you know, and this is, I think I said at the beginning that I've kind of realized following you a bit that, you know, truth telling seems to be your main life purpose these days. First of all, is that fair to say?
It is. It is.
Somewhere along the way, you realize that this is, I guess, the best way to help your fellow North Koreans, right? How did that happen? Where did this understanding come from?
I think, I mean, in a way, like in the past, when I was giving testimonies, right, even writing that book, it was unbelievably painful to relive all thing. I remember like writing parts about China, losing my father. Like I lost my father again by writing that part. So like literally when I crossed the desert, I felt like I left the desert again, right? It was a very painful thing to relive the whole thing. And even still to this day, like even when I was doing the Joe Rogan interview, after that I got crushed. And it's a thing like you let all the pain to feel again. And back then I did not understand that was important. You know, it was a very intangible thing. How much difference are you actually making even? But the thing is, after I was reading Jordan Peterson's book, 12 Rules for Life, during the pandemic, thankfully, I was able to read a lot of books again. And kind of I understood again that why it mattered. Like in the time of deceit, telling the truth is only brave, it's the courageous thing you can do, right? I do think the world that we are living in, it's as much as I don't want to admit in America right now, it is a time of deceit. It's just so much lies. Truths are so hard to find, and they're also making it hard to find. They're creating so much chaos unnecessarily, so people get confused. And in this time, if you think you know the truth, I think that telling that is the only thing you can do to make the world a better place, and as simple as that. And that realization just came to me last year. And I think that's why I'm devoting my life for that right now.
I mean, all I can say is wow and yes, and how important telling the truth at any time, but especially at a time when, let's say, deceit is on the rise.
It's so prevalent at this point. It's not even rising. I think everywhere you see the like lie, and it is so heartbreaking to see that. I imagined America to be way better than this. I had no clue this is what was going on. You know, when you see America from the far away, it's still the land of hope, right? The home of braves, like such a country that stood for justice so many years. And this country had that exceptional moralism, that bravery when it comes to freedom and individual liberty. It inspired me so much. And then coming here, looking at inside, I was just like baffled. Like, how is this even possible? And of course, I called America in the time of when the Trump was becoming president, in a very unusual time when the country becoming so divided. And people keep telling me this is not what America used to be, from both sides, I'm saying. So in a way, it's almost my fate that I need to fight for freedom wherever I go.
No, I mean, that's very fascinating. I mean, you were, you know, and this was in the interview you did with Jordan Peterson. You were talking about how incredibly disillusioning it was for you to go to Columbia University. And it's frankly, the whole discussion is kind of mind-blowing because, I mean, this is supposed to be one of the premier educational institutions in America for sure, in the world, probably, right? And I think you said that there was 0 classes that ultimately were worthwhile for you. But how is that even possible?
Exactly, right? Exactly. I was thirst for truth. I was thirst for knowledge after North Korea, where I had so much hunger for, you know, the sad part about being in North Korea is not just like you're starving and misery everywhere, that you are not even connected to your own humanity. You don't even learn the time before Kim's, right? North Korean calendar begins when Kim Il-sung was born, like Juchaewon. And then they don't even tell you that I didn't even know that I was Asian. They told me that I was Kim Il-sung race. So I thought, okay, I'm Kim Il-sung race, right? And so like there's so much beyond my being in the lineage of humanity, the struggle that we went through, coming all the way this place. It's such a long history that you find that the connection, that thing was completely cut off. So coming here, even like reading Jane Austen, like reading like Shakespeare, like people who came way, 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 way before me, the humans who thought certain ways. And that was so beautiful, like coming here, that rediscovering my lineage as a human being in a long, long, long with my ancestors. And of course now, like going to Columbia, they try to, they say like reading Jane Austen, you're subconsciously being brainwashed. Because she was living in the time of the white colonialism and racism, so she was a bigot. So that's how you got subconsciously brainwashed, and this is called like sensitive training. You look for the hidden oppression everywhere. And then like every single class, the conclusion is that American foundation is a bigot. The foundation, the constitution is like a bigotry, and then racist and white supremacist. The only way we can do this again is tearing down every single thing that we have and rebuild whatever the paradise they are describing. And this is cities implanted by every single person going to Columbia. And it didn't matter if it was an evolution class, even I told you like one of the Jordan Peterson was asking me, there's one class that changed your mind, what would that be? And I was like, yeah, that evolution class was so fascinating. Like, I don't know what Homo erectus was, Homo habilis, right? I don't know, but even that class, the conclusion was about the side of the white man's aggression. So it was just so heartbreaking that academia could not be away from this ideology. It's not about discovering the truth, right? It's all about being politically correct. And it's just heartbreaking. This is like seeing the suicide of Western civilization. Yeah.
I mean, it's incredible to hear you talk about this as someone who has lived through, you know, essentially a Stalinist regime at its extreme, you know.
Yeah. I mean, like, where Kim Il-sung lied to the point where convincing North Koreans they are gods, saying like Kim Il-sung, Kim Jong-il dies, but no, their spirits with us forever. Like they copy the Bible, saying that Jesus Christ died, right? But his spirit's with us forever. So they said, oh, Kim Il-sung loved us so much, he gave us his son, which is Kim Jong-il. And then Kim Jong-il died, but no, his spirit's there with us for all the time. That's why he knows what you think, how much hair you have in your head. And exact the same theology. To me, is that's the thing. People like, oh, nobody believes a lie, everybody believes truth. No, in a way, it's so easy to make people believe a lie. And that's why it's so important for us to keep questioning and keep that critical thinking. Get out of this groupthink. This dumbest thing ever is a groupthink. Humans are not rational. I mean, if we are rational, why would we kill like 60 million people on the mile? Like, we've been trying this dumbest ideology called like socialism, communism so many times in so many places. Whenever we tried it, it brought so much misery to us. And we're trying that thing again. And this is why like we need to know our fallacy that humans are not rational thinkers. And especially when we are getting into this groupthink, we completely lose that rationality. And it's seeing that America, the rise of this groupthink. And if you do not agree with them, then you are outcasted. You get deplatformed, right? And this is such a tactic that the Marxists, the communists use to silence people in the name of the common good, in the sake of entire collectivism, that we can sacrifice few individuals' liberty. It sounds amazing, it's all for the common good, but it's not. And it's just so, every single day now I'm looking at this country, it's so worrisome.
When I was reading about collective guilt in your book, I mean, I immediately thought of white guilt. And I think you mentioned that at the beginning. I mean, it's almost like, it's the same thing, actually.
It's absolutely the same thing. That's the thing, like, when we born, do we ask to become like Asian or white? We don't choose that. Do we choose our birthplace? We don't. Like, the greatest injustice for me was being born in North Korea. Like, I did not choose to be a North Korean. I wouldn't have, right? But that is something that you cannot change. But when you're being punished for the things that you didn't have any taking in, that is the injustice. That's a definition of injustice. And you're punishing people for being white. I mean, of course, back then, when there's America, there's like segregation and racism. And there were people like punishing people for being black. I mean, that was so wrong. But now we're doing exact opposite. We're punishing people to be white. And nobody, this child, like my son is like half white. He did not ask to be like half white. Well, how is it his fault? It's not. So now blaming slavery and asking for these people like your privilege, you're like a guilt that coming from this lineage is such a greatest injustice that you can do to anybody. It destroys human soul. And I don't know why America is choosing this direction of like destruction. And this country was so merciful, so much grace, and people knew what grace looked like. And they do not know other than just bitterness and resentment. So much resentment. At my Columbia campuses, every single one of them are so bitter. I mean, like, you guys are in the middle of Manhattan. You go to this Ivy League school, right? Like, let's talk about the privilege. The fact that you're in this point alive, that's a privilege, right? But they are so complaining how they're oppressed and so resentful. And that's like when I couldn't understand. This is the generation of lost. They are so lost that I don't even know how to solve it anymore. Yeah.
Well, I think you have one of the pieces at least, which is, I think you said it earlier, truth telling, you were telling the truth about North Korea. It seems like you're starting to tell the truth about about the US reality as well. And I think there's something powerful and I guess revolutionary
Apparently.
now in a time of deceit about this. Okay, let's jump to this other piece that I've been thinking a lot about. You had this horrific experience in China, but somewhere along the way, you have started to tell the truth about the Chinese Communist Party and the Chinese regime. And I'm very curious to learn, how this became so important to you.
So it's also initially I did not know, right? Back then everything was hidden from me, and especially the parts about Chinese connection to sponsoring dictatorship in North Korea is not known to the most of people. And I was studying more about North Korea, I picked up every academic paper, the CIA journalist, the analysts writing the book later, right? After their time is done, they write a book about it. I picked up every book that I could, and then reading more and more, and I was realizing, without China, North Korea cannot function in one day without them. Even talking about the missile test, North Korea doesn't have oil. Kim Jong-un cannot even drive his Benz one day without China giving them oil too. So how do you test nukes if you don't get any oil from them? You don't. So even no matter what, even last year during the COVID, China was using this illegal ship and giving the oil to Kim Jong-un to keep testing the nukes. So that is the thing, without China, Kim Jong-un can never exist. And the reason only that North Korean regime lasting this long, almost 80 years at this point, is because of CCP. And this is a thing people don't know. Who is actually responsible for this tragedy? It's China. And of course, Kim Jong-un is responsible partially, but I think when it comes to accountability, China is way, way bigger. They are enabling this dictatorship. And then also, of course, they are catching us and sending us back to North Korea, right? That's against their Geneva Convention by the international law. That is a crime against humanity. So where China committing this kind of crime, the international community, all these people in America talking about justice, equity, equality, blah, blah, they're having business with this evil regime in China. All these companies, the Walk, Nike, Adidas, all these companies talking about how America is systemically racist, and then they're kissing, CCP there. Like LeBron James. He's a hero for the woke liberals. He's talking about the racism that exists in America, all of that, the slavery, how that was wrong, and having no problem, defending CCP's aggression on Hong Kong. This is the biggest hypocrisy. And that's the thing, it's not in any way, I'm not saying that the slavery in happening in America is wrong. It is wrong. It was so horribly wrong. That's why what is happening to Northern people is also wrong, right? If your consciousness telling you that slavery is not okay, then how are you okay with this? That's anybody, if honest, they should ask that question to themselves. Why do they only care about that slavery happening in America? And this is what breaks my heart. Why not in Africa there are slavery markets? In Middle East, so many parts of the world, there are still many slaves.
And frankly, even in America, in this day, there are people who are being trafficked and effectively, function as slaves. It's incredible, but we don't hear much about that.
No. It's all about their own political agenda. That's what just so bitter about, especially American media, is that whatever, when I was willing to criticize Trump, that is the only time New York Times wanted me to come up to criticize Trump for meeting Kim Jong-un without preconcessions. And whenever I try to talk about my people, how the girls in China being trafficked, how my people are suffering under this regime, they don't care about that parts. They just want to find a narrative that fits their agenda. And till this day, if New York Times calls me and asks me my opinion about the woke culture in this country, I want to go on there. I don't discriminate them, but they don't care. And then, of course, they keep saying, why are you getting on Fox and to become the, propaganda puppet for this right-wing, conservative, bigot, Nazi people. So I never knew that in America, this thing, I just never knew this. It's so idiotic. What a waste of time. Why are you doing this to each other? I don't get it.
You and me both. And I honestly sit up at night sometimes thinking about that, because it does feel like a kind of a self-destruction, doesn't it?
Exactly. What do they gain by just people penalizing them? Why did you get on Fox? How does that anybody gain anything from that? It's just a culture of denouncing. That is such a North Korea thing. We always have to keep denouncing our enemies. If there's any sign of infiltration of our enemies, we gotta keep denouncing, and report on each other. And seems like in America, they've gone so far, like all you see is like people just denouncing and pointing fingers at each other without recognizing each other's humanity. And this is the thing, like I spoke at TED like 2 years ago. You are in the room of these movers and shakers, like the technology, like all these companies are there. And then I told them like I have a event in Texas, and they were like, "What do you mean you're going to Texas? That's a Trump country." Like I made a decision that I will never set a foot on those Trump countries. And I was like, "Do you know that's America? That's the same country, right? These are most highly educated and powerful people in the world are doing this nonsense." And I think this is how any country goes down to the, it's a gutter. Like that's how you destroy your own country, by doing that. Like when you stop appreciating diversity of thoughts. And that's where we are gonna all like become like North Korea, where there's only one idea that's allowed to be accepted.
So you think America, it's actually conceivable that America could become like a North Korea?
Totally. I mean, when was it conceivable? I mean, did you expect to be banned or like demonetized and censored by YouTube 10 years ago?
Actually, didn't remotely occur to me that that could be possible.
Me neither. Until I started my YouTube channel last year. And then people talk about censorship. I was like, what the heck is that? They're just exaggerating. I thought, like, how can that be possible? Why would they do that? And then I also making all these videos about women suffering in China. And then that was a time of Me Too. So I complained to Google, like, don't you guys not supporting Me Too? I'm talking about the women's suffering in China under communist regime.
So they censored those videos?
Absolutely, they do. And then, of course, like there was a video that I made about what I think about the Second Amendment. Of course, those videos all get censored.
What do you think about the Second Amendment?
I, of course, support it. I don't think there has been bigger threat than government has been to the individuals. Like Stalin killed his own people, right? Like Mao killed his own people. Look at Kim Jong-un. Like, in a way, the government are the most dangerous thing that we can have as individuals. Like that's the number one thing that we need to watch out. Because they can do so many horrible things to you and your family. And think about it right now, this time in Hong Kong, the 75% of people went on street, demanded not to be part of mainland, right? Two system, one country. And then because none of them had a self-defense, they just took over like that. And even the majority wanted that. And think about North Korea, even just 30-40% of the population had guns. They would assassinate leaders. They would assassinate Kim Jong-un. But Kim Jong-un couldn't just do that to the people. So it is, I mean, ultimately you can say that why just Kim Jong-un go kill them all? But then weapons gonna go to different people. They're gonna do way more harm to the regime when they try to take over country like completely, right? You cannot kill all your people, then who do you rule over eventually? Nobody left there. So in a way, it's even though your government has nukes, that's what people saying, okay, Kim Jong-un got nukes, and then these people have guns, not gonna make a difference. No, if Kim Jong-un nukes their home people, he's gonna die too. That's the last dumbest dictator gonna ever do, nuking their own people and then while he's himself being there. He cannot use a nukes against his own people. So it's so effective way of deterring the rise of dictatorship in your country when the individuals have a right to defend your rights and freedom. And seeing that in America, how the most valuable about the Second Amendment is so lost. And it's like freedom is messy. It's not like simple. Being free is a hard thing, right? It comes with a lot of responsibility. And in America, I think people just really forgot it.
You know, you still believe, and I know we share this belief, that America is kind of the bulwark against the Chinese regime, which is certainly the most powerful regime out there at the moment. Mm-hmm. And you're saying things aren't looking very good for America.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think if America going this direction of not valuing freedom, right, how fragile freedom is. It's like North Korea wasn't like this, right? Like until the Communist Revolution happened, we are not this like oppressed. And Venezuela, I mean, like look at how many countries, Cuba, Venezuela is so well before, and I think it's that's the sad thing about democracy. It seems like it's possible for people to elect dictator.
Right, Nazi Germany.
Exactly. I mean, Hitler was voted by his own people. He was loved in the beginning, and that's the thing. It's like it's ultimately is up to individuals to decide and learn about the history of like humankind, the history of like freedom and oppression, and then when we vote like responsibly. Otherwise, freedom can be lost so easily within us.
You know, we've been watching this, I guess you could say, flubbed exit from Afghanistan the last few days. You know, just as we're taping, it's in the process of that. A lot of what I'm hearing is people saying that, wow, I've lost a lot of faith in America. Through this. This is what I'm hearing in the dissident community. I'm hearing it from all sorts of people. What's your perspective?
I mean, that's the thing. Like, I gotta be really honest. I mean, Trump talked about that, right? He initially wanted to take off out of Afghanistan, and then of course Biden did follow up with the plan. That's why he was saying like yesterday on the live. It's like that's what I did, following up with the previous plan. I mean, all it needed was like 2,500 soldiers in there, putting the American flag, right? Like, it wasn't even not that many people were left in Afghanistan. It wasn't even, and they were like, we are spending so much money over the last 20 years, keeping that region safe. And the thing is, like when the Kyrgyzstan, when they left these Yazidi people, they were genocide. These girls were being sold as slaves to ISIS members. All the men get killed. I mean, this was like only 2015-16. 5-6 years ago, we saw what happens when these soldiers leave these people behind. And that's the thing, like, it's just such a, politics are so complicated and people always becoming this partisan thing, right? Because now Biden did it, you are the only bad thing. I don't know if Trump was in the office, he would have left them or not. But ultimately, Biden left them. And that's why blaming him at this point is that there should be some kind of responsible country in the world, that it is somebody's job to fight for justice. It doesn't have to be America, and America did play that role, right? Because this country was founded upon ideas of liberty and human dignity, and that's why America did play the world police role. And seeing that now as America is like, okay, even us are struggling within the country, right? Like I met so many struggling American families in the Middle East, I mean Detroit, like all those regions. They said like, we just cannot afford that anymore. Like we are struggling. So I am compassionate to those people, like why they were saying America first. And they're like, you know, they like, we really need to be taken care of at this point. We are struggling too. And in a way, it's such a complicated time. And,
Sure.
But the thing is, what happened to Afghanistan is like so horrible that it should not happen like that way. It was so unbelievable. I mean, these people gonna die. So many of them gonna die for sure.
I guess what I'm asking is, you know, if America is supposed to be this bulwark against communist China doing what it's doing in the world, like, you know, North Korea being a premier example, right? I'm thinking to myself, you know, has that equation changed at all in the last few days in your mind?
I think yes or no. I think that ultimately it's gonna come to that. Are we gonna, as a humanity, deciding to be the slaves to the states? Or are we gonna still fight to be free as individuals? That is because the biggest two powers are rising in the world right now. That is America still somehow defending for individual liberty, and China, no, it's okay. Government can do better job for the bigger good of the people. So it's okay to be in a big government who is kind of maybe efficient enough to get the economy up and giving people like what they need, lifting them from the poverty, right? That's at least what China keeps saying, that there's like a plural system, states can exist. But the thing is, I think it should be some kind of coalition in the West, the country that believe in democracy and freedom. It cannot be America alone fighting for this individual liberty at this point. Well, even in South Korea right now, so many countries, even in the Western European countries, are ready to give up freedom, and then like getting a big government to supposedly taking care of them. So I don't think it should be something global coalition. That's what I see. I don't think America single-handedly can win this battle, for sure. And we need allies. And those allies like Japan, Taiwan, like, South Korea, like in the Western European, a lot of countries still having those values. So it's I think America should be faithful to their allies. She cannot just abandon Afghanistan like that. And still gotta show that you stand for justice. Right, it's not just some of efficiency or like cost and what is good for Americans only, but like what is for the entire humanity. Are you doing the good thing, right thing from God? I think it's sad that as we progress as a modernization that we are losing God. However you define God, I think God did play a significant role in us, keeping us, being moral, being conscious, being kind, being compassionate, and be strong. And I see that in America we are losing that. So it's just that was the hardest thing after North Korea, right? How much do I want to adapt? How much do I want to take in from American culture? How much do I want to let go of my past? And then there are certain parts I do not want to let go. There are parts that from North Korea I want to still keep. And there are some parts of America that I really love. I want to like adjust and change. But not all of that being America was good to me. And I was able to develop that perspective and decide what was right for me. And I'm still doing that process every single day.
I mean, it's quite the process. I mean, I think you've even told me that, I think in the book you say that, when you were with these missionaries in China, you were ready, you're going to believe whatever was needed and you're going to believe it very deeply because that was going to get you out. It was an extremely pragmatic thing. Has any faith developed? You were just talking about God. That's interesting, but I don't understand you to be a part of any religion. So that's what is that evolution like here?
So after, you read the book, those missionaries told me that I was guilty, I was dirty because the things that I had to do to survive in China. I was shocked, right? It was not my choice. All I did was trying to survive. So of course it did not leave me a good impression from Christianity. It made me feel like they are so dogmatic, are so not like understanding, not tolerant enough for me. And then later I was understanding that they were actually the most selfless people I've ever met. They were in the middle of China, risking their lives to rescue North Koreans that nobody knew existed, with their own life. And so you gotta sometimes see their actions, not what they do or what they say, right? And also, like last year after I had my son, of course you see the giving a birth is a miracle. Like how otherwise do you explain that? And I definitely saw the role that God can play. And they say even science only understood of 20% of the things that we understand now. Like we still don't even know if it's for sure God made us or not, right? There's so much unknown. And I read a lot about Buddhism last year. And like what you said, some parts of religion actually is not dogmatic and free you. And one of the Buddhism, the idea is like there's no self, then there's no pain, no suffering. All about the ego and the self, that's what creates suffering. And some parts of it was definitely liberating. So I think you don't have to be dogmatic. Like, some extreme, the religion is so bad. But I think pursuing the high moral, higher power can be a comforting thing. So it's not like now my idea is like becoming like, back then I was like, I'm an atheist. I oppose every kind of dogma, right? But now I do support those religion that opens people's minds and hearts.
How old are you again?
I'm 27.
No, you seem to have lived many lifetimes already. I want to ask one, I guess, a bit difficult thing. As we're kind of finishing up, there was a cost to you leaving. North Korea, and you knew that, you know, if your family could be. I don't know what the situation is with your remaining family exactly.
Yeah.
But what was the cost of that ultimately? And I guess I have to ask, you know, do you feel it was worth it?
So back then when I was leaving, as I said, there were like almost 300,000 North Koreans left. So during the Kim Jong-il time, the second Kim, that's when I left. I mean, like millions of died, like 3 to 4 million died in the one part, so like northern part where I lived. So even when you go to China, North Korea would not know that you went to China because you could just have dead on the street from the starvation. So it was so easy to hide where you went to. So that's what we did. But when I spoke out, that was the biggest miscalculation that I made. So even after I escaped and went to South Korea, I still kept in touch with my family due to the brokers that I had. And they were fine. But when I spoke out, I was thinking they're all like high-profile defectors who were like the diplomat to the North Korean escaped, right? And I was thinking, like, how can be a regime threatened by a 13-year-old girl? Like, testifying what every North Korean said. It's like there's a starvation, there's oppression, right? I was not like revealing their nuclear program to the world at all. So I was thinking, I just didn't think I would be a threatening thing for the regime. And when I spoke out, that is when my family got all punished from my both sides, mom, dad side. And that's the thing, like that's when I was truly understanding the price of freedom. Like I knew that I was risking my own life. I'm still on the death like target list by Kim Jong-un, and of course South Korean intelligence informed me that many years ago. But I just didn't think the regime would go that far for my testimony. But it is a thing, like I also got comfortable being out of the world and then forgetting what the true evil looked like. This is what I was saying, like the Americans' inability to recognize true evil, which is China. The people's like inability, because never seen the darkness truly, right? These people live in such a light, in a so much good environment. They don't know how something can be that terrible. And I think for me too, like I saw it, like this is unbelievably cruel regime. And then after going to South Korea, like why would they just go after some 13-year-old testimony? And there was a lot of North Korean defectors who were speaking out in South Korean TV shows, and nothing happened to them. And yeah, that's where I completely miscalculated.
Before we finish up, tell me quickly, where can people watch your YouTube channel?
Oh yeah, they can go to Voice of North Korea by Yeonmi Park, and they can find me Yeonmi Park NK on Twitter and Instagram. Not on TikTok, so I'm on Facebook, yeah, all the social media you can think of.
And you also have this local site, I believe, right?
It's been amazing to support these like platforms that is like valuing freedom of speech. So yeah, I've been trying out locals and it's been fantastic.
So any final last words before we finish?
I mean, thank you for everything that you do. It's so amazing to meet people like you. Yeah, so refreshing.
That's so kind, and it's likewise incredibly amazing to meet someone like you. It's such a pleasure to have you on American Thought Leaders.
Thank you.